you very much for taking your time today to join us to have a look at change management and where to start and what are some best practices to really get going with change management, especially in if you've got a system center service manager solution that you've got up and running at the moment. But a lot of the things that we're going to be looking at today are across everything that we do in ITSM and ITIL there as well. So it's not specifically for System Center Service Manager, but that's what we'll be demonstrating in, because it's a tool that we all know and love. Sorry, I should introduce myself first for those of you that don't know me. My name is Brett Moffat. I'm the Solution Architect for Cyrus here in Asia Pacific. I'm actually based in Adelaide in South Australia. And I'm always here to be able to help out with any System Center Service Manager questions or Cyrus questions that you may have and how to get the most out of it inside your environment. So service management, look, I just want to touch base on really what service management really is, first of all. So service management is a customer-focused approach to service delivery which crosses organizational boundaries. Now, I really want to wanted to bring out that point that it crosses organizational boundaries. Today we're going to be talking about change management, and I guess we're going to be really focusing on change management from an IT sort of perspective. But certainly don't close your mind to change management being across other parts of the organization as well. Same with everything that we do as far as service management is concerned, such as self-service and automation. Doesn't necessarily just have to be about our IT services. Could also be of another service that your business might offer internally, maybe facilities, organising someone a desk, or the toilet's blocked or something like that. So there are lots of things that we can do around service management outside of the IT organisation, but right across the entire business organisation. But today specifically, we're going to be focusing on change management. So change and release management here. Now, ITIL V3 Foundation Handbook tells us that a change is the addition, modification or removal of anything that could have an effect on IT services. Now again, the caveat here is I would take out IT and replace IT with business on any business service that we might have. So the other quote here from ITIL is change management provides value by promptly evaluating and delivering changes. And I really want to focus on that part there, promptly. Change management should be something that is nice and quick and easy to be able to implement across our organization. Long delays and overcomplicated processes really doesn't help us get change management through in a prompt time frame. So what's the challenge? The challenge that we have about creating or updating an existing change management process, or even getting one off the ground. We're either stuck with someone else's mess, so that's the way it's always been done, that we've always had it there in the past. So we've inherited these problems from a previous group of people that have been around the organisation. Someone's attempted to get change management into the organisation and up and running, so we're sort of stuck with a piece there. Or we're not sure where to even start. It seems so insurmountable of all the work that we've got to do ahead of us, far too complicated for what we do. So where do we even start there? It's too complex. No one follows the right process. It's so time consuming inside our environment. So it's a real challenge with inside organizations to make sure that it's not time consuming and that we do have exactly the right process. And we get people to follow it, and people want to follow it because it is so much more simply. So the real focus on this one is that change management provides value by promptly evaluating delivery of those changes. So really focusing on that promptly side of change management. Too many fingers in the pie. There are just too many people wanting to be a part of change management that want to start to control change management. So the example there that I give to people is, if everyone had their own processes, that's great. So we might have a infrastructure team that has their own processes for change. And that's great. It could be quite mature and works quite well for them. The problem is that they will then push back on when we start to look at organizational change management and start to say, well, we've got our processes, let us use our processes to do our thing. And then HR says the same thing, and the desktop support team says the same thing, and everyone's got their own little mature processes across the organization. The problem is it's not standardized across an entire organization, so it's almost impossible to control. The analogy I have is that what if every car manufacturer had their own process for driving, for getting about, that Ford's only went on the green and Holden's went on blue traffic lights instead. Quite rapidly we'd see chaos when we start to implement these. Each individually, the processes work fine and they're very robust and they're very mature. But as soon as we start to put those processes together in the same environment, we have absolute chaos. So getting standardization across all change management processes that we have is absolutely critical to having a successful change management process. So I haven't set up a survey here, but in your chat window there, if you could sort of put some answers in there as well, sort of what percentage of time does your IT team spend on unplanned work? So we're talking, you know, is it 0 to 25% of your time, 25 to 50% of your time, 50 to 75 or greater than 75%? Is it really taking up a lot of your time of things that are absolutely should have been caught, should have been fixed, but instead you're having to run around, fight fires? A few people answering back here, 20, 30%, 20 to 50%, somewhere around there. Nice. No, that's pretty good. If we can keep it under sort of 50% of our time, that's not too bad. But of course, at any point where we are with that, of course, the more that we can ensure that unplanned work doesn't happen, that we're not finding firefighting that happens on a day-to-day basis, then we're not having to go and rework things, and we can spend a lot more time on either planning and testing for our next change or implementing the next and latest and greatest technology that has inside our organization, and we're getting much more value back to the organization as well. So I'm actually surprised in the results that I can see there in the chat window. No one over sort of 50%, which is awesome. We did this presentation, I did this presentation earlier on this week as well, and we had sort of 4 or 5 people in the room that were sort of up in the 75% time of just sitting there fighting fires day to day. So if we can get that down to the sort of the 25% or below margin, I think that's what we're sort of aiming for as an industry, and is well and truly achievable as well. So the solution, where do we actually start with this? Key number 1 that we've said plenty of times already here is changes must be able to be promptly evaluated. Promptly being the fact that we've got all the right data, so the change advisory board or change manager doesn't have to go hunting for information. The second and third level engineer don't have to write War and Peace into every single change that comes in. I saw a change the other day that came across that. It was a 29-page document on the change. Just to read all 29 pages of it is not promptly. So great that there is that much diligence around it, that's fantastic, but not very prompt to be able to review these sorts of things. And where need be, reduce the process wherever possible. Make sure it's fit for purpose in these processes. We don't want the change advisory board to be sitting there talking about basic changes that happen all the time that no one needs to be really focusing on. Change Advisory Board is there to be able to, I guess, schedule changes, but also to be able to take care of those real high-risk factors that can take down an organisation and prevent us from working. More process is not always better. Adding more steps into the process isn't always better to the organisation. A standard practice across an organisation is much better than more process and is much better even than best practice. So standardising what you do and making sure that everybody knows what that standard practice is really helps drive people's understanding of change management and also their willingness to then take part in it. More process is not the solution. Classify risk correctly. So one thing that quite often get is, I guess, across change advisory boards is people arguing about risk. If it's a high risk, we've got to go through all this extra process. If it's low risk, we can just do it on a weekend and we don't need too much more. So the second and third level engineers are always trying to get things into low risk, and the change advisory board is always trying to evaluate risk where it can affect the organisation and move it further up into the higher risk categories if it needs be for more testing. So we always have this fight. So classifying risk of our systems beforehand is really key to be able to reduce that noise on our change advisory boards and making sure that the processes are fit for purpose of what we're doing and getting that standardization. The question I quite often get asked about evaluating risk is around how do you even start? How do you start to know what the best way to evaluate risk of your systems are? And the one that I've heard and I think works really, really well and gets people a really good place to be able to start with their risk management is their disaster recovery. So use your DR plans to assign your risk classifications here. When we start looking at disaster recovery plans, you know, the IT manager comes down and says to people, you know, what do we need for DR on all our systems? And everyone puts every single system we have in there because why not? Let's put it all in there. So we get a quote on that and the bill comes back and the IT manager faints and then gets back up and says, right, okay, only the critical systems. And we start to weed out those systems that we have that either are non-business critical, so things that we can go down with and still function with on a day-to-day basis, but we wouldn't want to be out for months at a time with. We start to filter out those things that have multiple redundancies already built in, so we don't really need to have a DR plan that goes off-site. And we really start to weed out to the point that we're only worried about those items that are really, really high risk to the business, and we have a good DR plan around it. And we spend quite a big chunk of our IT budget on making sure we have that DR plan in place. So we can take those DR plans to really assign risk classifications to our systems and then marry that up directly into change management. So I'd be interested to hear from everyone here as sort of just a yes/no answer as to whether or not you think your disaster recovery information inside your organisation could be used and you could use it to improve your risk classification of your CMDB and your services that are associated to your CMDB. Cool, cool. Getting lots of yeses coming back. Some absolutelys, which is awesome. Potentially, yeah. So a lot of people are unaware of what their DR plans are in depth. So, you know, it's well worth bringing that up, having a look at those DR plans and seeing where those systems are absolutely critical. And then, of course, making sure that our change management, especially on those critical systems, marry up with what our change processes look like. So if we know that we've got something that's going to come up, it is going to touch one of those systems that if it goes down, we're going to spend a large amount of money in data recovery or those sorts of things to make sure those systems stay up. We need to make sure every single time we do any sort of change to that, we can then follow a much higher risk profile to our changes to make sure our testing's all done properly. Cool, excellent. So it looks like a lot of people there, potentially either could do it or believe that they do have a disaster recovery plan that could absolutely be used there. And of course, I hear you saying, enough talk, let's actually find some actual solutions here. So, before we jump onto the next point, I wanted to actually show some real world examples of how we can use this inside our environment. Now, a lot of people, when I start looking at Service Manager and start talking about Service Manager to people, they want to know, well, how do we do it? How do we do asset management, or how do we do change management? Just tell us. And most engineers come back going, well, it depends on the organization, it depends on your systems, and it depends on what you've got inside your environment, and it's not a one-size-fits-all piece. So lots of people then ask me, well, just give me some examples. But one organization's examples are going to be different from another organization's examples, and so forth and so on. So when putting this together, I had a bit of a think about it, and the one thing that we all have in common, or most of the people that are on this call have in common, is the Sorosen toolset. So I started to put together some change management templates of what it would look like if we were to upgrade our tools, the Sorosen tools, inside a production environment. And whilst they don't fit exactly into the model, we can sort of make it fit so you can get a good example of what change management would look like. So all of the tools that sit on the SCSM console, so your having a total mental blank, the My Active Work items, or Notify Analysts, or any of those tools that you have as part of the Essentials stream, we could really evaluate those as low risk, because it's only the IT analysts that use them at the end of the day, and they could do their job if those tools went away, the license broke, something went wrong. It might mean just a few extra clicks, but they could do their work. It's not a business critical function. Even if the entire ITSM solution went down, we could still revert to pen and paper and telephone calls for supporting our organization if we absolutely needed to. So that's a good candidate for low risk. Creating a medium risk one, we could sort of move up to the self-service portal. The self-service portal, at the end of the day, end users are affected by this change, and they would see a negative impact if they were trying to get to things. But calls still could be logged via the telephone or email, so it's not a critical system in what it is that we do. And then for a high risk, we've put asset management. Now it's truly not a high risk sort of category, but for argument of this webinar and to give you some examples, we'll put it in as high risk. But we know that the data in asset management affects a lot of support, and requests, and potentially some financial information that people are actually trying to get back. So there is some business critical numbers that appear in there. Also, the upgrade for asset management is quite complex. There's quite a few different systems that are going to get touched here, and also quite a few steps that are involved in the process. So the templates that we followed here, and we'll go in and actually have a look at these templates here in a moment, focused on these key points of being less process wherever possible. So we're using templates wherever we can to create them. If we do a change on a regular basis, even if it's an infrequent basis, but we're doing it maybe once every 6 months, if there are multiple steps in it, let's template it. I was asked this question the other day about it, that, well, why should we template a change that we only do once every 6 months? Well, when we actually do a change, we get to the end of that change, and we should do a review of that change. How did it go? Did it work well? Did we screw something up? If we did screw something up, what went wrong? What could have we done to mitigate this in the past? If we don't learn from those mistakes, and we don't learn from the successes that we have, to implement the next time around, then all of that information just gets lost. So by creating a template for even infrequent changes, we can start to put some real rigor around, hey, last time we saw that if we rebooted this server before this one, something else happened, make sure that this happens. We get those steps, those processes in a much better order, and we really start to reduce the risk of implementation across a lifetime of a system. Don't bother CAB for everything. So wherever possible, wherever a standard change was in, we've had a look at those templates and always try to make sure your templates don't go to CAB unless it absolutely needs to. A change manager to approve, to be able to check the timing on changes, that it doesn't affect any other changes that are currently happening in the system, or that it has been pre-approved by the system owner. So the person who is actually going to be at risk if something does go wrong. Test. The number of people that do not test changes and they go through on changes with it being, oh, well, it's documented this way. So that's where we'll go ahead with this change. This is where most of time for change management should be spent. Test, test, and double test wherever you possibly can for your changes to make sure that when it does go into production, that it is going to work. Spending more time in testing and less time in change advisory boards or filling in large, complex change management templates is absolutely key to getting success over time. Get the right people involved. So again, not CAB all the time, but maybe the system owners that have to be a part of it. Subject matter experts. So for example, subject matter experts not only inside your organization, but your vendors as well. So if you're going to upgrade your portal or you're going to upgrade your asset management for Syrison, why not drop the Syrison support team an email saying, hey, we're going to be upgrading our portal on this day. Can you just make sure that you're available and that we've got everything that we need for us, that if something does go wrong, we're going to have that support there behind us. And at least our support team here would be able to know, cool, these guys are going to be doing that. We'll make sure that we don't host a meeting or we all go away on a company retreat during that time. Most vendors would actually appreciate the heads up of, hey, we're going to be doing this. Is there anything else we need to be thinking about that comes down their line as well? And even end users, letting end users know, hey, we're going to be doing this change at this particular time. It shouldn't affect you, it might affect you, whatever that information is, to be able to keep them across the loop and to dig out any of those items that may affect the business continuity at the end of the day. Review, both review the change as it goes through, but also at the end of the change. How did it go? Did it go well? I know that once changes usually go through, lots of people just like to go, right, that job's done, on to the next thing. If you do review a good change or a bad change, you're going to be able to make sure that you feed that back into the change management system for next time, so we can really validate that change. And of course, we know that we need to do the successes as well as the failures for change management. You know, and we've all seen this one before with change management of, hey, tough, works for us, over to you guys. Well, you know, we want to be able to review these sorts of scenarios so it doesn't happen next time. Okay, so let's jump over to a demo. So let's actually see what we've done here. If we can bring up my environment here. Log on to our lab here. So with our templates here, under this library, what I've done is created a management pack, and we'll make this management pack available in the next day or two for everyone to be able to download and actually take advantage of these templates if they would like to. We've created a bunch of templates here. I'll highlight these up. These guys. The Cyrus Portal upgrade, Cyrus Console app upgrade, asset management upgrade, password reset upgrade here as well. Now, none of these are pre-approved, but we could have a bunch of pre-approved ones here as well. But as you can see, we've got the low, medium, and high risk ones that are a part of it. So if we have a look at the low risk one that we've got here, standard template that we can pass across everything. We want this to be as rapid as possible. Move it across here into the middle of the screen. So we can promptly create these as and process these changes as promptly as possible. So we've got a title and a description. We can quite easily, the only thing we need here is a version number of what we're actually doing to upgrade. We've already given it its priority and impact, and its risk set to low. Config items to change. We could already have this set up as service manager services in here. They're not as part of these templates because our CIs are going to be different to yours in our lab environment here. So if you do grab hold of these, you could update this template with those services that would automatically appear in there. Planning. All the planning information is already there. This is the implementation plan that appears for most of the console applications. As you can see, very small, not a huge amount of steps, not very complex. The risk assessment plan, hey, we've already evaluated this in the past. Very brief description around this. There's not much that we need to ask specifically of these. And our activities. So being able to split out these activities. Now, this can be as granular or as low as possible, as minor as you want inside your organization. This is just an example. In this particular case, test it, take it to a review, review that dev test ready for deployment. So basically take it back to the system owner and say, hey, we've tested this, what do you think? Yep, good for that, and off you go. No change advisory board needed within this. Nice and simple. We actually perform the upgrade and then run the test plan at the end of it just to confirm that it is actually functioning. So very brief, very rapid. The only thing an administrator would need, an analyst would need to enter into this template is really the application that is being upgraded and from what version to what version, those sorts of things. We have our test plan already in our manual activity of what it is that we need to be able to test. In this particular case, depends on the application. So nice and rapid, nice and prompt change management that appears. But if we now move up to the medium one, which is our portal upgrade, we start to add a bit more rigor around what it is that we're doing. Okay. We've added, so we've upped this to medium risk. Planning, we've got a bit more planning in here. So a few more steps of what it is that we're actually doing. Then some questions, some very specific questions about what it is that we're doing with this. Has the database been backed up? Is there any custom changes outside of the custom space folder? Because last time we did the upgrade, we found that someone had added an extra SQL query somewhere in the background of the IIS page to make it more corporate, and we lost it when we did the upgrade. So, these sorts of questions are being prompted back into the process to learn of what we did last time. Will the change occur within business hours? Those sorts of things. The test plan, a bit more of a detailed test plan, what it is we're actually going to test. Now, probably I will probably add in here is before, if I can spell, and after. So we've got a test plan for what we do in dev and a test plan for what we do after once we've actually got it into production to validate that the change has actually gone through successfully. The more details, of course, you put in here, you can then pass that information. If you had automation, you can pass that information down to the lower activities in this process as well, if you need to. So here in activities, these are the items that we would actually assign to people. Again, test, approve the upgrade for the Cyrus portal. Now, being a medium here, maybe have this one goes to not only the system owner, but maybe also just a single change manager. So to make sure that, hey, this is inside business hours. What does that actually mean? No, I think we need to take this to the change advisory board because it's a massive change or it's not a big change. What's the story? They can make that evaluation there. And make sure also the timing fits in with what else is going on inside their environment. Back up, perform the upgrade, and then run the test plan at the end of it. So again, similar sort of approach of what's happening. We can go into one such as this. Here's all the installation instructions that actually exist. So when someone actually receives this piece of work, they're not having to go through all the other mess of the change request and whatever, all the other information. I'm not interested in that from an analyst perspective. I'm just interested in being able to get the piece of work that I need to be able to do to get the job done. If we move on to the high risk one, again, not really high risk, but we'll see this. Again, more information, much more information in here. Lots of different steps with this implementation plan. Takes a lot more work, a lot more questions that we have to ask, a lot more pointed questions around the technology. What does our test plan look like? How are we going to do these sorts of things? And our activities. Again, adding a few more in here. Different levels of review. This one's specifically going to CAB every single time, and then even review activities of the current state, for example. So using different activities here to assign parcels of work to individuals. There's no reason with this change management that the very first thing that we could have in here is an automation piece, a runbook automation activity that goes to the top of every single change request, and then looks at having that runbook automation activity, look at the associated systems and services that are linked to this change, and automatically adding the reviewers that need to be added to these review activities. Who needs to be involved? Are there additional pieces that we need to add in here? And actually dynamically building a lot of the change process specifically for that change. There's no reason that we can't create a request offering inside our self-service portal that only analysts can get to raise a change for upgrading, to raise a change, and then out of the list of templates, have a particular template that we've selected, and from that template, what is it that, specific questions that we have to ask that's a part of it, and then forming those questions back into it. What that starts to introduce to people is that analysts don't like to fill in change forms. I know, been an analyst, and I have come up with many wild and wonderful ways of getting around change management wherever I can. So wherever we can make change management as simple as possible for analysts to be able to fill in the data that they need to put in to get valid data out of it, to make that as simple as possible so they don't have to write War and Peace. That way we're gathering together as much information to be able to pass on to the change advisory board or the change manager so they do have the information that they need, and it's not just, I want to reboot this server. That way people are much more likely to take part of that change and take part in it than to try and circumvent it, because it's a lot harder to. One of the examples I gave the other day was potentially even creating a request offering for requesting of rebooting a server. I want to reboot a server. What's the server you want to reboot? And that was the question. Enter that and the change goes through. Now, if it's a dev box, not a problem, it's automatically approved and away it goes, and the system automatically restarts the machine with all the right context and information in the logs. If it's a production system, it could then evaluate on the fly what it is that is currently being used, what the time is, when it is that this person wants the restart to be done, and then either have it pre-approved as part of that standard change template or deny it back to the person automatically to say, hey, no, this needs to go through a bit more of a rigor of change. And once we've got that sort of process in place, then removing people's rights via group policy and AD rights to actually restart servers. So no one can actually go in and forcibly restart a machine. They would have to go through this process. As long as we make it simple, as long as we make it prompt, there's absolutely no reason that we couldn't start to take away people's rights to actually do things and force them to use the right process. But as soon as it becomes too difficult and too cumbersome, too burdensome on the engineers, there's no way that they're going to take a part in it, and it's actually going to start to affect the business delivery that we have. Some of the other templates that we have as part of here as a demonstration was notification template for, there's no reason why when these changes go through that we don't have an email that notifies external people of a change that's coming up. Hey, we're going to be rebuilding our portal on this particular date. And automatically email support@cyrusson.com to let us know that that change is actually happening. So starting to automate and pull in the workflows and use the tools that we actually have here in front of us. Then of course the change managers and change advisory boards really to be using the tools that they have at their disposal for these systems. Well, of course I hit everything. So for change management, I need to go into work items, not in configuration items, and using that change calendar. The change calendar both from here and from the portal, being able to show exactly when these changes are. Are these changes going to interfere with each other? What is our changes looking like this weekend? How is this all coming together? The other tool for change management that I really like, and I think saves a lot of time as well, specifically from an analyst perspective. I don't want to have to change advisory board, and the change manager really wants to make sure that we've thought about the change before it goes ahead and we've not just done it willy-nilly. We'll want to make sure that we've answered all the right questions. However, as an engineer, I don't want to have to go in and fill in a whole bunch of stuff. So with our changes, one of the apps that we have here is the risk calculator. So by running this risk calculator, now this one's already run, but we'll run it again, the change advisory board or the change group could ask a bunch of questions that we need to know about every single change. We need to know, hey, does this change affect more than one site? Is it going to impact more than 10 employees? Is it going to be done inside business hours? Whatever those questions might be, the standard questions that we would want answered inside a change. And then to be answered yes, 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 no. As an engineer, I'd much rather be doing this than filling in these questions manually. And I hit go, bang. And that's associated that risk, and put those answers directly into the change as well, into the risk assessment plan. So the change board will actually see those questions and the answers that were a part of it. And again, with automation, if you put a runbook automation activity at the start of the change process, you could have it check for that flag of, has the risk calculator been run against this change already, yes or no? And if it hasn't been run, send it back to the end user saying, hey, you haven't run the risk calculator, I need that information. So ways of being able to use the tools at our disposal to really start to make these change process a lot more prompt than we do currently. So we do have these tools. Absolutely be using it as much as you possibly can. All right, so I just need to be able to jump back into this. Cool, so summary and next steps. So the key takeaways here, so what we're going to do is add those downloads to our Codeplex website, so you'll be able to grab hold of those templates after this webinar. Well, I'll send out an email to everyone letting them know exactly what the link is for them. Remember all the key points of change requests that we've gone through. That all change should have a prompt process, the standardization across the organization. Don't bother your CAB with changes that don't need to go to CAB. Simple risk calculation using your DR, testing and reviewing. And always reach out if we can help. If there are things that you would like to get assistance with creating some more templates and how we would do these sorts of things, how we would look to automate a particular piece of that process inside your organization, always let us know. Right, questions. If you do have any questions, please put them into the question board. That's the end of our presentation here, and you can always get more from following at Team Syrison on Twitter or following us on Facebook there. We also have the Vimeo web channel, vimeo.com/Team Syrison. We'll record this session has been recorded, and we'll put that up on Vimeo there in the next day or two. So got a question here that's just come through on, can the risk calculator ask questions customized to suit individual organization? Yes, absolutely. So in the risk calculator, every single organization, you come up with those questions. It's a maximum of 10 questions, and they can be custom per organization. So you just go in there and you type those questions that you would like in there. What you can't do with that, with those questions, is have it individual for different departments. So it's standardized across an organization. Yeah, so if you wanted to have specific questions put forward for creating a change, I'd suggest creating a request offering that you would have up on the portal that people could then fill in that way. Does the risk calculator show in the Syrison portal, or is that a custom task that needs to be created? Yes, it is a custom task that needs to be created. It's not part of the portal at the moment. Not sure on the roadmap on that one. There may be a story in place for that one. There may be a feature request that's already currently in. Only thing I can say is watch that space. Another question here is the change approval board all users defined as change managers? So that all depends on what you want inside your organization. Usually there is a change advisory board that consists of change managers, but also key stakeholders across the entire organization. So the IT manager may not be one of the change managers, but he or she may be involved in the actual change advisory board, sitting there and actually going over what's going on. And the change advisory board, of course, will change who actually sits on it based on who's available, what the change is going to be about, and also the other people, the other stakeholders that need to be a part of that at a particular time. So I know that risk is something that we assign to services and so forth as a general rule of thumb, but of course that changes dynamically over time. So a particular item may be medium risk for 9 months of the year, but then in that 3 months of a year where we've got a particular item going on as far as the business is concerned, it automatically jumps to high because we're inside a particular window that the business is doing at the moment. Can the risk another question here is, can the risk calculator have a question like how many people affected? 1 to 5, 6 to 50, 51 to 500. At this point, in its current form, no, they're purely yes/no answers. So if you set those settings based on, if I'm going to ask 10 questions, if I get 5 of the questions back that are yes, it's medium risk. If it's 8 questions or more that are yes, then it's a high risk. So that's in its current form at the moment. Another question here, are there any plugins coming for the change calendar, so to accommodate for reoccurring changes? So the change calendar will show all the changes that exist inside Service Manager. So if you have a reoccurring change, there's no reason you couldn't set up a workflow or an automation process there to create that automatically every single time. I know that there's a process that I've been talking about doing a blog article on around patch management, for example. It's something that we do on a monthly basis. It's something that we usually have some pretty good process around. So why not be setting that up as an automated process? But directly from the calendar at this point, there's nothing in particular around reoccurring changes. But there's absolutely, you could automate reoccurring changes from templates if you'd like to. Another question here, can you view or promote the change calendar to view in the portal? Absolutely, the change calendar does exist in the portal, so you can see that directly there. You can see all the changes or even the tasks that are associated there as well. So if there are particularly scheduled, particular manual activities that are scheduled to occur, we can see that in the calendar as well, and just increase and decrease that as well. So being able to see that directly from the portal, of course, is fantastic because you're not having to worry about the console at all. So wherever you possibly can, we'd like to think that people use the portal more than they do the Service Manager console. It's certainly a lot faster. Question here, another question, can you run the risk calculator as a step in your change? And can you do this via the portal? So the risk calculator doesn't work via the portal, so it's not in there at the moment. It's not a feature of that at the moment. Can you force people to do it? You can't invoke it as such. It is something that the analyst would have to invoke themselves. However, that's where you'd probably go back to a request offering to actually ask those questions, and then you could automate that answer even further again. So specifically, like you said, like the question was earlier around specific numbers that exist in there as well. Okay, any other questions? Don't seem to have any other questions there. So I'll stay online here for a little bit. If anyone has any other questions, please let me know, and I'll answer those as we go on. But apart from that, thank you very much for your time today, and I hope this was useful.